I'm your host, Jack, your failure connoisseur, and today my guest is Kayleigh Flaherty. She's a Webflow developer located on Long Island, New York. And if you need a reminder who she is, she was part of the killer duo with KC Katalbas for the Slater app challenge, obviously. And she made an incredible game called Debug, which she was in the top 3 for that challenge for. But what I'm trying to say is that Kayleigh is extremely talented. And although she's not posting every day on Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff, she is doing amazing work every single day, practically. She's so super, super busy. And in fact, organizing this interview was really hard because she's so busy. She's doing so much work. She's worked for Blackpeak and Ammo Studio, but she's also got her own individual clients too. She's flying high, but has it always been this way? The failures that we're going to talk about are learning for too long and not actually jumping into the client work itself, relying on one agency for work, and accounting for her time properly. So, Kayleigh, welcome to the Webflow podcast.
Thank you so much, Jack. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm super excited to have you, and it's awesome that you're here. So what is your relationship generally with failure?
Oh my gosh, my relationship with failure is we're super close. I've made so many failures, and honestly, I continue to make so many more. I'm learning as I go every single day, but I've definitely made a whole bunch of mistakes that I'm glad to make them, and I'm glad to learn from them so that I don't make them again.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, considering you've worked for Ammo and Blackpeak and your own clients, like, that's a ton of learning in a very short space of time, because you haven't actually been doing Webflow that long, according to my stalkerish research on LinkedIn. So, you've got a hell of a lot of industry experience in different agencies with your own clients, with, agency clients in a very short space of time. So I imagine you've had tons and tons of learnings along the way.
Yes, tons of learnings, tons of screw ups. Luckily, I haven't shut the internet down entirely, so everything has been fine enough, but definitely a lot of self-reflection that has happened and just taking notes about how I can be better going forward.
And can I ask you something that I think I want to touch upon, because I think that if you're a Webflower and you want to freelance straight away, I would say that generally that's quite hard to do, because you don't actually have like systems and processes in place in order to do that. Like, everyone talks about systems and processes, but unless you've worked for an agency, it's kind of like, how are you creating those systems and processes? But you can kind of get inside an agency, see behind the curtain, and then be like, oh, that's how they get clients. That's how they do sales calls. That's how they manage projects. And you've done that at 2 different agencies, which is a really unique thing to have done. Can you share any advice to any young Webflowers that are like, I want to be a digital nomad and work from the beach, and I want to just do Webflow freelance from anywhere? Or do you advise people to actually go and work in an agency first before trying to head out on their own, maybe?
Well, firstly, I just want to say that that's actually exactly how I ended up in this career, is because I was like, I actually just want to travel the entire world and work from the beach. I read this book, like The 5-Hour Work Week, and he talked about, obviously not Webflow, but like working from wherever and everything. And I was like, wow, that sounds so awesome. And I haven't done that at all, but that was the goal, and that's how I ended up here. And when I first started out, I was originally going to have my own company, which is why I started the LLC before I did any agency work. But I found that it was a lot easier to learn Webflow through tutorials and everything, but to learn how to work with clients and manage clients and sell to clients, I've definitely learned a lot from working for other people and seeing how they're doing it. So I would say maybe if you were thinking about it, maybe work for somebody for like a year and then see what you feel about working for somebody else, or if you're ready to take the plunge and do it all yourself. There's definitely pros and cons to both. So I would say it just depends.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think something else that's interesting to talk about is you can be a freelancer, but kind of work more on a permalance basis for particular agencies, which seems to be something that you've done really well, is like, well, you want to be a freelancer and you want to be able to take on projects kind of as they come and have a little bit of the freelancer flexibility, but also have the consistency of work that comes with, maybe being more of like a permalancer or someone that's like consistently getting work from an agency. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how you kind of found that pattern working for you?
Exactly. I would say it definitely makes it a lot easier when you have a good working relationship with an agency. At this point, I would say that it's like I have monthly retainer clients with an agency, and they're the same clients every single month. They send requests whenever they have a request, when they want something updated or changed. I would say that it definitely provides a little bit of income security. And honestly, it also really helps me out because I personally am not there yet to want to start reaching out to clients on my own. Like, I love the building process and I love using Webflow, and I don't necessarily want to be like calling clients up and like doing all of this like self promotion. I would rather just sit at my computer, like have design files handed to me and just build them out. And that's what I've been doing so far. And it's definitely been a great way of doing it. That being said, eventually I will transition to start reaching out to people on my own, but I haven't felt it was the time for that yet.
No, but I think that's a really interesting thing to say, where you're like, you know what? I know that I want to be doing the creative. Like, I don't want to be spinning a lot of different plates, which naturally you do need to do as someone that's, a freelancer. You need to be like the salesman and the marketer, and
there's so much
the
you have to do.
and the accountant. Like, there's a lot of stuff that maybe people don't necessarily think about when they're, thinking about this beach lifestyle as a freelancer.
Right. No, yeah. There's so much that goes into it. And I've seen all these agency owners do all of the things that you have to do and take care of a bunch of employees. And it's just a lot to be in charge of. But I applaud everybody who's doing it because you're all doing a great job.
Yeah, shout out the agency owners who are working hard to actually get the business and do that and allow the creatives to do their thing. But I think it's worth saying that, like, you seem to really enjoy the actual building of the sites, and that's what you want to focus your time and energy on, and you don't want to do all the other stuff. And as a result, being a freelancer that's working for a couple of different agencies seems to suit you really, really well, which I think is like, just to say, when people think of a freelancer, they might think, oh, well, they just do, all the different bits and bobs that being a freelancer entails, and they need to get their own clients and all of this stuff. But actually, I think you're a great example of someone that's like, yeah, they're a freelancer, they want to manage their time and do things on their own accord to a certain extent, but they have that consistency that comes from, being part of something bigger than just their own freelancing practice. So good on you, Kayleigh.
Thank you so much. Honestly, like, sometimes I just feel like I'm an employee for like 8 different companies. And I also have the freedom to find something else, find another project. I see some kind of listing and I'm like, oh, this looks like a lot of fun. Then I could take that. Like, my boyfriend, he has a job where he can't work for anybody else. He can't have a side hustle. He can't do anything. Like, he's very stuck to the job, which honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if I should even be saying that or if that should be in there. But like, it's very good to have the freedom and the flexibility to do whatever.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Can I ask you a little bit about retainers, though? Because you say, yay, retainers, they're consistent income, they're consistent work. And I guess also you can like get to know the clients over time if they, month after month, you have maintained a good relationship. And I guess you can see results over a long term, which must be really satisfying. But can you tell me a little bit about like whether you prefer retainer projects or like working with clients on retainer versus like one-off builds, or can you talk to me about like how you manage those projects, what you say yes to, what you say no to, and what you prefer?
Yeah, for sure. So some of the retainer clients come in with a website already built, and I'm hopping in and taking over from wherever they're at, which has pros and cons for sure, I would say, because everybody who builds a little bit differently. Some of these websites are coming from templates that have been updated and updated and updated. So it's a lot to like kind of go in and create a new system, but also keep up with all of their existing systems. And then some of the other retainer clients would be like, say the website is built, I built it or someone else on the team built it, and then it would just be like managing it going forward. But I would say that the retainers, a pro to the retainers is, like you said, having a good relationship with the clients that goes on for multiple years, which is really nice. You really get to know the people. You can like joke around with everybody. It's you can send little emojis in the Slack and you don't feel weird about it. um, some of the cons of that, though, being that it's sometimes hard to account for time because you don't necessarily know. Like, I could go to bed and be like, wow, I have a good day. Like, not a good day, but I have like a solid day of work and nothing too crazy. And then like 6 things can come in overnight. And I'm like, okay, and now I have a million things to do tomorrow. So it depends. It definitely fluctuates, but I would say it's great to have a good relationship, but it's tough sometimes when every retainer client wants something done at the same time.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I guess it's like anything. There's pros and cons, right? Like one-off project builds might be, I don't know, might be more lucrative in the short term, or, you know, you might enjoy the kind of zero to hero transformation that you can do in just a single build from a Figma file to a Webflow build. But the retainers,
I have to say, a one-off build is, I love starting from scratch and taking a Figma file and building the whole thing out. That's like my favorite thing. Honestly, one of my favorite things in this world to do is when I get a whole like beautiful Figma file and they're just like, okay, develop this. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the best day ever.
it's like adult Lego. That's the thing, isn't it?
It's so like everything is just a clean slate. It can all be set up exactly how I set it up. Like, I know exactly what all the classes are. It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. That's lush. If there was one key takeaway that you learned from working in an agency environment that you might want to implement in the future, if you were to set up an agency, like, what's the one thing that you're like, I've seen how important this is, and it must be done if you want to set up your own agency?
I would say having a good way to track project management, whether that's a project manager or you're using some kind of task manager. When there's a lot of things going on and there's a lot of people working for you or with you, it's very easy for things to get lost in Slack. So having a good way to track everything and deliverables and due dates and making sure everything is on time, I would say that definitely some form of like tracking or somebody in charge specifically of that.
So maybe having like a project manager or an account manager.
Exactly.
That is like the client and then creative like liaison. Like, they're going between the two to make sure that they've got everything that they need in order for stuff to happen. And that person is kind of like taking charge with sign off at different stages, etc.
I think so, for sure, because they're super important. I mean, things could easily fall apart without a project manager, I would say.
Yes, I have seen that before too. Very, very important. And so what's your North Star, Kayleigh? If I was to ask you now, I mean, you're obviously working for your own different clients. You've also got some agency work. You know, you talked a little bit about the 4-hour work week. Is the goal just to work 4 hours a week and live on the beach, or where are you trying to get to?
So just in life, you're saying, ideally the goal is, well, I love what I do for sure, but I work all the time. I really am still trying to figure out my own work-life balance, but my ideal goal would be to work with being very choosy about what I'm doing and not necessarily rely on that. Overall, like in my life, I would like to start buying investment properties so that I could eventually not have to work at all, or I could just work as I please, I would say. So I have the income coming in from that. So that is kind of what I'm like starting to work on, is like saving for a down payment and then going from there.
Exciting times.
But that doesn't have anything to do with websites.
Well, it kind of does. I mean, I would say like you're working really, really hard all the time at the moment to have more freedom, which comes back to what you said about the 4-hour work week. Like there's this story, I don't know if you remember it from the book, but it talks about this fisherman. And this American guy comes up to this fisherman on this Caribbean island and says, "Oh, wow, you caught that big fish. Like, there are a lot of fish like that out there." And the guy's like, "Yeah, there's loads of fish out there. Like, I catch them every day." And the guy's like, "Wow, you could start your own fishing company." And the guy's like, "And then what?" And this American guy's like, "Well, you could start your own fleet, have a few boats, sell not just here, but, across the whole Caribbean." And the guy's like, "And then what?" And it kind of carries on in this same vein where this American is essentially bigging up how big this fishing company could get. And it ends up saying, and this, fisherman says, "And then what?" And this American guy's like, "Well, then you could just fish whenever you wanted and catch fish on the beach on a Caribbean island and just, spend time with your family whenever you wanted." And it was essentially like exactly what he was doing at that present moment.
Exactly.
I was just thinking that story is, it's one I always keep coming back to. But it's interesting, this idea that we're all kind of doing creative work because it makes us feel fulfilled. And like, I think a lot of us are in like a state of play and we're trying to get back to a sense of childhood maybe when we're doing that type of thing. But also we just want freedom, and whatever that freedom represents for us, whether that's having the choice to work when and where we want, or financial freedom to buy whatever the hell we want, or it's just, I always think it's an interesting question to ask people on the podcast, because I think it's actually very linked with failure and then what they attribute to success and why they've gone through the failures that they've gone through and the learnings that they've got, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But I do have to say, I do already feel very fortunate for this job, just for the fact that I can work from wherever. I am wearing sweatpants 95% of the time. I could work at midnight if I want. I could sleep in if I want. It's really, really awesome to have that flexibility already. I feel like I do have a decent level of freedom that some other industries do not give you. So I do feel really lucky for that. I definitely feel like this is exactly what I was meant to be doing, for sure. Like I do feel very fulfilled by this career. So it's a great feeling, definitely.
Beautiful. That's amazing. Okay, well, now we've reached this peak. Now let's ask you about your deepest, darkest secrets and your failures that have given you the insights that you now have today. So tell me about failure number 1, learning for too long.
Yes, I was definitely stuck in, there's a term for it. It's like information paralysis or something. Is that the term? I don't know. My problem was that I was just learning like so much all the time. I was learning constantly. And before I was even learning Webflow, I started completely with JavaScript actually on Codecademy. And then after that, I learned HTML and CSS, and I was like, wow, I really should have learned HTML and CSS first, but that's fine. And then I ended up at a coding boot camp. And then after all of that, well, the coding boot camp got shut down because of COVID. So then I was home and it was COVID, and I was learning Webflow just like nonstop in my bedroom because I had nothing else at all to do. And that would have gone on and on and on. I'm telling you, like, I'd probably still be in my bedroom learning right now had I not started working with clients. And I actually got really lucky because I didn't even save myself from this failure. Like, I basically got handed work, which was really, really fortunate, because I'm telling you, like, I still would be learning in my bedroom right now if it wasn't for that. I think it was definitely both of those things. I don't think I ever would have felt ready to like sell a client on my work. I think I was also honestly just scared of putting myself out there and just actually doing the thing. Yeah, I think it was mainly just like fear and being like, I don't know. I was like, I just don't know enough. And also at that time, I was like, I need to learn how to do Webflow. I need to learn how to design. I need to learn GSAP. I need to learn how to write all code by myself. And I just wanted to learn it all. Oh, and I need to learn how to write copy. I need to learn how to like Photoshop a little bit. I need to learn 3D. Like I was literally like learning everything, and you just don't need to learn all that. That's like people have their specialties, and that's why you build a network to like find people that you love to work with, because you can't be the best at everything. So I just really, when I started out, thought I had to be the best at everything before I could even begin, which doesn't make any sense.
Okay, cool. So how should someone know when they've learned what they need to learn in order to actually, start approaching clients and or maybe start approaching agencies to get work? Like, because it's a hard thing to actually realize, when do you know enough in order to actually, potentially get paid to do that, if that's what you're trying to get to?
I would say you should definitely at least learn all the foundational aspects of building a website. Maybe even like have some kind of class naming system. There's a whole bunch of different frameworks that you could follow for that. But I think it's very important to learn what you still need to learn. Like know what is still going to be needed to learn. But at some point, you should also just pull the trigger and do it, because you learn so much on the job. And it's honestly so much more effective learning, I guess I could say, when there's a client like waiting for this to get done. When it has to get done, you have to figure it out. You have to search on Stack Overflow. You have to talk to ChatGPT. You have to dive through the forums, which honestly, that's, in the beginning, it was a whole lot of like reading through the forums, and I actually feel really lucky now for ChatGPT, because I feel like it's a lot easier to figure out solutions. But I would say definitely know the foundation, know what you need to know like overall what all the concepts that you're going to learn eventually, and maybe have a class naming system down, and then just take the plunge and learn on the job, because that is the best way to learn anything, I would say, when the pressure is on.
But would you say that it's also like try out different stuff like you did to a certain extent and work out where you particularly like want to delve deeper into in web design or web development, and then within web design or web development there might be like a particular path that you want to really kind of go down? Like, okay, I'm particularly interested in web apps if I'm really interested in Webflow development. Is that kind of how in your mind people might approach that?
For sure, except I think that you will quickly figure out if you like doing something or if you don't like doing something. Like I hopped in Blender for probably 4 days. I was taking a Blender course and I was like, okay, this is not going to be for me. Design it took me a little bit longer to be like, I like development more, but I think that eventually you'll figure that out. I don't think you have to know that initially to start working. I think that you'll figure that out down the line.
Awesome. Good advice. And I think like it's worth saying as well, we spoke with, I spoke with Grace Walker on the podcast as well, and she said something similar, but essentially you're getting hired to be an expert in a particular thing, whether that's by clients or by agencies. Like if you want to be the person for design, then make sure that that is what you're showing on your portfolio. If you want to be like, I do Webflow development, don't start talking about how good you are at copywriting and all that other stuff as well, because it does dilute how much of an expert you look at the thing that you say you're an expert at, which I think is kind of a common problem that I see when people first do their portfolios. They're just like, we do everything really, really well.
But
like,
how?
Okay, well that's
like one person,
already...
it's really hard to do every single thing really, really well. They all take years of knowledge and experience. Like you can't just learn it all at once.
Yeah. And also I think like if you're just starting out, especially like I think, someone is maybe taking a little bit of a risk with you because you are just starting out. And if you say, yeah, I do X, Y, Z as someone that's just starting out, then it's very obvious that you are not an expert, because you literally cannot be an expert within the amount of time that you've been doing all of these different things.
That also would make it a lot harder to to take the plunge or to learn on the job, because now you're learning like 3 things on the job instead of just trying to piece together one thing on the job. That would be a really stressful situation for sure.
Yeah, I'm not saying this as like this was me personally, by the way. So if anyone's listening to this and it's like, yeah, Jack, like I don't know, I tried to do both design and development, and I was pretty bang average at both as a result. And I think it would have been so much better if I was just like, okay, I'm going to focus on just design.
No, I 100% agree. My first project is actually still live, and it's so terrifying to look at because I designed it also, and I am not a designer. Like, that is not something that I would want to do, and it just took time to figure that out.
Yeah, and that's the thing though, like, you know, there's nothing wrong with taking some time to try stuff out. It's just I think eventually being like, okay, this is the thing that I find easy and other people find hard, and as a result it's like, okay, well, this is where you've got maybe more leverage than you would if you chose something else. So just think it's worth bearing in mind. Do you have any final thoughts on that point, Kayleigh, before we move on?
I think you covered it all. I think the saying that's coming to my head is, I think, jack of all trades, master of none. That's the saying, right?
Yeah. I think it's jack of all trades, master of one.
Oh, master of one. Okay.
Wait, am I being an idiot? I think the full saying is jack of all trades, master of none is better than a master of one, which actually kind of goes against the whole point. But I tell you, as someone that's named Jack and is trying to be a jack of all trades, I don't know if it is better than a master of one, to be honest. But sorry, carry on with your point, Kayleigh.
I would say my final thing on that note is just take the plunge. If you feel like you're ready and you're just scared, just try. There's nothing that could happen. You know, if it doesn't work out, you're still right back where you are right now. So what's the worst thing that could happen if you just try?
Amen. Spirit of the podcast in a sentence. I appreciate that, Kayleigh. Tell me about failure number 2, relying on one agency for work.
Yes. So when I started out, I was just at one agency, and it was great. You know, it still is great, but there are obviously times when an agency, you know, is doing better than others, especially as it's like a newer agency and they're trying to learn just as you're trying to learn. It's definitely like a learning process for everyone involved. I would just say that it's always good to diversify a little bit, I guess, to have other people that you know and that you like can get work from, just so you never are at a point where you have no work and you're like freaking out. I guess because there's no money coming in. And also, like, when it comes to getting other people to work for, every single person that I work for has been from doing something like the ammo. I worked for ammo. Sorry, my brain is like a little scatterbrained. But when I started working for ammo, it was owned by Diego. And the whole reason I met Diego is because I responded to one tweet where he was like the product guy for Y Code. And it was like, who wants to see a demo of Y Code? And I just responded like, yes. And then I met Diego as he was like showing me this demo. And that's how I ended up getting like my first Webflow project with him and with ammo, is because I did this random Y Code thing and like demo. And then I went to a conference, and that's how I met Casey, one of my like closest friends. And that's also how I started working at Blackpeak, because I just said like yes to all of these random things that did not necessarily correlate with like getting a job. It just like everything kind of folds into place, I would say. So just if you are looking for someone else to work for, I would say just always say yes. If something comes your way, like never turn it down unless it's like obviously outrageous or whatever. But if you could do it, I would say always say yes to random things. Which doesn't, I get it's
say
a little
yes
off,
to random things.
Off tangent a little bit, but that's like the best thing that I've ever done is say yes to like. One time I responded to a Facebook post and I got on like a 15-minute call with this guy, and he was like, this is not for you at all. But I know somebody who this could be for. I mean, I know somebody that you might like, and then that person sent me over to somebody else, and now I do work with them. It's just everything's connected.
Everything's connected. Beautiful.
And I know that's a little
but
off
I
topic.
love what you said.
Sorry.
It's not off topic. No, this is a really important point. When people think, I need to get a job, they'll go to a job board and they'll apply with a load of other people to a job that they've got no connection with necessarily. They don't know anyone that works there. They're just applying with a load of other people, slamming in a CV and their portfolio site and hoping for the best. Now, that's not to say that that is wrong.
No,
but
definitely not.
in my experience as well, when I've got work, it's not because I've applied through a formal job board. It's actually because I've replied to a newsletter of a founder.
Right.
I was like, wow, this is a really interesting newsletter. Thanks so much for sharing this. It's really inspiring. And then he replied to me and he was like, hey, I just checked out your portfolio. It's cool. Let's jump on a call. Had a call, got a gig. And then that turned into something longer term. And vice versa with the podcast. I mean, through interviewing different founders, I've got to know them, and there's been like opportunities that have come through that. But it's not like I was looking for work necessarily. It was more like I was looking for connection and like-minded people, and just like, I guess no agenda. But then that kind of is attracting work into my life as a result of like not specifically wanting to take something from someone else. It's more just like, hey, fellow human, you seem like a laugh and I love what you're doing. And let's just like, do you want to just chat and see what happens and, just like hang out? And then a year later, someone might get in contact or whatever. But I think it's like planting those seeds for opportunity, right? Like, just trying to help out people who are trying to get from A to B. And if you can help them get from A to B, then that might turn into something longer term or whatever. So completely hear and appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so crazy how things work out, because if you would have told me this is how I would have found work, is by all of these random like little things that you don't even think about you're doing, right? You just are like scrolling Twitter. You're like, oh, hey, I'll see a demo. Like, it's so not a big deal. And then it turns into such a big deal.
Yeah. And I would also say as well, like, a lot of the time people might say, well, that seems quite an indirect way of trying to get work, guys. I mean, come on, like, I need work tomorrow, you know? And fair enough. Like, if you need work, then maybe going to a job board and being like, hey, I can help you. I'll do this gig for this price and you can decide whether you want to keep working with me or whatever. Like, yes, there are like route one options to get work, but I found that the jobs that I've enjoyed the most and the ones that have been most fulfilling and frankly the most lucrative as well have just been through actually just being an interested human in other people and then kind of just seeing where that goes. So, it's worth planting seeds and commenting on people's feeds and just being like curious about other people. And then I think in turn they'll be curious about you, and then that might lead to other
100%.
stuff.
I really could not agree more.
I just want to double, triple emphasize this to anyone that's listening. It's like, they might think, oh, social media is a waste of time, or I don't really like social media or whatever. I think social media can be toxic unless you're social on it. Like if you're just doom scrolling, I think it is kind of toxic actually. But if you follow people that you want to get to know, or you want to you're just inspired by it, and you just like randomly, there's this chef called Legom Chef who does these like crazy cooking videos, right? And I've been following him for ages. And I always like comment on his feed, and I think he knows me. And basically when I moved back to the UK, I sent him a message. And like, we're now kind of friends, which is awesome. Amazing. And he's like, yeah, but he's just a guy on Instagram who I just thought was hilarious. And like, I always did like comments on his feed and stuff. And I actually did an Instagram live with him ages ago, which is proper random. But anyway, my point is that like just being interested in other people and kind of just like not with any agenda kind of leads to some weird, wonderful things, which you could never have imagined happening if you didn't just say, fuck it. Hey, what are you up to? I love what you do,
Exactly, 100%.
Might need to work, might not, but it's cool.
And the Twitter community is really great. I don't tweet nearly as much as I probably should be tweeting, but I love just reading everybody and their interactions. I feel like people have found some really great and authentic friendships through Twitter, which is so cool. I love the niche little group that Webflow has. So if you're just starting out too, I would say definitely get involved on Twitter, and there's a Facebook group. Twitter's, I would say, is better, but there's plenty of people. There are people doing meetups. There's tons of ways to find other people with the same interests.
Amen. And there's meetups in person as much as online. So Ross Hatton, shout out to Ross. He does Twitter Spaces every week. There's loads and loads of different communities like Floxies, Flow Party. Like, you know, there's kind of a cringy phrase, but like your vibe attracts your tribe, as it were. There's things that are happening all the time, and get involved. Who knows what will happen? Okay, we've hammered that point at home. Tell me about failure number 3, accounting for time properly.
Yes, this has been definitely an ongoing lesson that I've made multiple times. But like I was talking about before with the retainer clients and how you don't always know what is going to come in the next day, or you never know. Even if you don't have retainer clients, you never know what opportunity is going to come through the door the next day, right? So I've had times where I'll be like, oh, well, I don't need to finish this tonight. I can finish it tomorrow. It's 8 p.m. Like, I don't need to work till 11 p.m. tonight. I can watch a movie or something. And then the next day I will have 10 things come in, and suddenly I'm like underwater. I'm stressed. And this also, honestly, this is probably like kind of bad advice because you should take some time off. But I think a better thing to say would say, like, if you're doing like an actual project and you've got a 3-week deadline, do not leave it till the 3-week deadline, because there have been multiple times where I'm pulling an all-nighter. I'm staring at the computer. It's 4:00 in the morning. I'm like stressed out to the max just to deliver the site like 10 minutes before they are expecting to go live. And that is never good for anyone involved. You do sloppy work. You are just stressed to the max. It's better always to deliver a little bit early than to leave it to the last minute. So I would say if you think you have a lot of time, like, always shorten the amount of time that you actually have in your head, so that you have ample time to like fix and go through it and QA it. And yeah, just don't leave anything to the very last minute ever if you can avoid it.
Are you quite like a lastminute.com type person? Like, just generally, you're like, if I've got 3 weeks, that means I've literally got like a day, which is the final day. Like, you're like 3 weeks off, and then bang, I've got to do it.
I have to say, like, I kind of am. I never went to college. This, like, learning Webflow was like my education after high school. And my experience before this was high school, and I definitely was leaving everything to the absolute last second. I had an essay due. It was getting done the day before. But you shouldn't apply that to a career. It's just not the same.
I think there's like a law that's called like Parkinsons law or something like that. But essentially, it's if you give someone a week to do something or a day to do something, they'll probably do it better if they've only got a day to do it, because they'll spend exactly the same amount of time on it, but be super, super focused. Whereas if you give them a week, then they've got a time frame that gives them leeway to like not really focus on it and then suddenly be like, oh shit. Whereas if it's just like, okay, you have a day to do this, then they'll just like smash it in a day fully focused. I just think it's kind of an interesting concept. But like, yeah, I think a lot of Webflowers, if it makes you feel any better, you know, a lot of Webflowers are people that have a million tabs open. They might work on multiple different projects at the same time. Got YouTube up there.
No, definitely.
Like they've got multiple
I've
screens.
got Harry Potter playing.
Yeah, exactly. They've got a podcast on. They've got like, yeah. So I don't know. I don't think you're the only one in that boat, but definitely this idea of, it comes back to what you said though about having a project manager or an account manager or whatever the term is that you want to use to basically describe the person where, you know, they are getting information. And they're also, I find the best project managers are the ones that can see problems that don't yet exist, but soon will. Like they can anticipate the next
Right.
move, or like the lack of the next move a lot of the time of the client. And then they can guide people like maybe you, who are like really good when they get, here's the task, you need to get it done, you'll get it done. But if they're like, nah, well, it's kind of like, let's see how it goes, then things can kind of shift quite quickly from this is all good to
everything is on fire around
yeah.
you. It's like the little dog meme where it's like, this is fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that like cartoon dog where it's just house is burning. But I mean, like, how do you recommend someone who maybe doesn't have a project manager and it's just like, yeah, cool, like I need to account for my time better, but what does that even like logistically mean? Like, what do they need to do in their life that maybe they're not doing, in your opinion?
Well, like I said, I still am definitely like, I still will run into this problem, but I think the best thing to do is just lie to yourself. If you have a due date and it's in 3 weeks, just tell yourself this is due 1 week before, and that's the due date, and that's what you're accepting the due date as, and then it can never be late. You have time to work on it, and you've got a week leeway too, just in case something goes wrong.
I like that advice. I think some things that I found personally quite helpful, just to add to your train of thought there, is having an accountability partner. So if you do like working sessions with someone, and at the start of the session, you're like, okay, you need to get what done by the end of this 2 hours period. Okay, that, cool. I need to get this website done by the end of 2 hours. Okay. And you both just like go to mute, as in like on the screen if you're working from, remote working with someone, and then you can kind of like both zone in. The other thing that I've done, which I found really helpful, is to book fun stuff like that I will only be able to go to do if I've got whatever it is done. So if it's like, okay, I've got 2 weeks to do this project, next week I want to go to this comedy club, and that's like my reward for getting this thing done this week or whatever. So it's kind of like tricking yourself with like a treat.
Yeah, no,
I'm
that's
kind of
great.
like a golden retriever.
That's really good advice.
That's really
definitely
helped me personally.
My parents
Maybe try that out if
grew up telling me like, do what you have to do before you do what you want to do, and I think that definitely applies there. And it'll just feel so much better to just know how good you'll feel at that comedy club, knowing that everything you were stressing over is done.
And you can properly laugh without, there's nothing worse than going to a comedy club and being like, oh, fuck, I need to do my tax returns or something. Like you're laughing and you're like, oh no. Like you're remembering something within the laugh. And everyone's there having a blissful time apart from you, where you're trying to have fun, but not having any fun at all.
Like lurking in the back of your mind, stressing you out.
Like a monster under the bed. Yeah. It's, I mean, obviously I'm not talking from my own experience there. Okay.
Also, one other thing, you said it's helpful to have an accountability partner. And if you don't have an accountability partner, there are tons of videos on YouTube that are like, work with me, and they've got like ambient sounds and rain noises, and you watch someone like literally just sit and stare at their computer. So if you don't have someone like right away, you could always do that.
That's a really good hack. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Having said that though, if you are an introverted person and you're like, yeah, guys, like you're talking about finding an accountability partner, and I don't really know anyone that does Webflow because I'm just starting out in the space and I'm really scared. Twitter is friendly. There are a lot of people who are starting out. There's a Slack community called New to the Flow run by Lish Laupama. She's lush, super friendly. Send her a DM on Twitter and, she can invite you to their working sessions and into the Slack, and you'll meet like-minded people, and there is a lot of support out there too. But if you're super introverted and really anxious, obviously stick on a YouTube video where someone just stares at you with some raindrops in the background. That might help you get it done too. Cool. Is there anything else that we need to add on top of what we've previously talked about, or do you feel like we've given the fans all the nuggets of learnings from your failures that you want to give them?
I think there's tons of stuff that could be covered, but I think those are enough failures that you guys need to know about me in one sitting.
Fair enough. One thing that I just want to add that just came to mind as well, where we talked about getting stuff done for clients, is if you think that you're going to be able to get something done in a couple of weeks, if you tell the client 3 weeks and get it done earlier, that is obviously a better experience for the client than you saying, yeah, I think I could probably get it done in a week and a half. Like, I'll push it. And then you don't, and then you look like a massive dickhead.
1,000,000%.
So just
1,000,000%.
So just bear that in mind if you're also someone that's like, you know, trying to please the client so much so that you actually piss them off. Because I've been there and I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to pull a couple of all-nighters and get it done. Like, I can do that. Like, I can actually do that. Like, when people say I pull all-nighters, I'm really not an all-nighter guy. I'm more like a, well, 5 p.m. My brain's a bit mushy.
An all-nighter will actually mess up your week for the next week. It's never, ever worth it. And I really like what you're saying, because originally I'm saying lie to yourself to get it done sooner, but you should just lie to the client and say it's going to take longer. I like that better.
Yeah. I mean, lying to the client, I don't know. That phrase makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. But yes, I think like making sure that you can do things properly and make sure that you give yourself enough time to do them is a healthy way of doing it, rather than trying to force yourself to be Superman when maybe you don't even need to. A lot of the time clients say, well, we need this done ASAP. They don't need it done ASAP. If they need it done ASAP, that's probably because they are completely disorganized, in my experience. So, and they don't have the copy and any of that stuff if they need it done ASAP, is what I find.
It's usually never an emergency. The world is going to keep spinning. That's what I try to tell myself when things are a little bit crazy. And also, I just wanted to point out that this is why I'm not the client-facing person, and this is why I work for other agencies, because my advice is, just lie to the client.
Hey, and this is why the Webflow pod is all about being candid. So, you know, maybe lying to the client in some, like, you know, parents sometimes need to lie to their kids to ensure that they're safe, even though a parent would say to a kid, you shouldn't lie to me.
Right.
It's like, okay, well. So, I don't know. The world is far more nuanced than we'll ever realize. Are you ready for the most difficult question you've been asked so far?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I guess so.
What is your next failure going to be?
Oh boy. I don't know. It's hard to say. My next failure is probably going to be not following any of my advice that I'm trying to give here, if I'm being completely honest.
You can't say that.
Why not?
I mean, I guess you just have. Okay, why do you think that might be the case then?
I mean, it just depends. It definitely does depend. I'm sure I will still continue to have projects that are at the finish line and I'm super stressed about them, but I think I definitely know enough now to try to avoid those situations. I think that they still will inevitably happen, but yeah, I think that, I don't know. I definitely still have failures to come for sure, and I definitely have tons of them.
Well, let's lean into those failures and make sure that they bring great lessons so that you can come back on the podcast and share even more nuggets with the fans. Kayleigh, you've been an absolute honor to have on the podcast, and thank you so much for sharing as vulnerably as you have.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.